HCAM TV thanks you for watching this presentation. We'd love for you to become a member and use your creativity at our station. Please visit hinghammedia.org or call us at 781-836-5094 if you would like to learn more.
Our sixth and final lecture in this year's series of Living in a Polarized World, and the wolf and the lamb dwell together. It's been a very exciting year, going back to last October when James Carroll addressed us, and then in November the wonderful Pursuit of Harmony, Arab and Jewish people coming together to present a program for us, and so forth. It's been a good year, and now we're planning for the next year. So before we begin this series, I think we can talk tonight. Just like to go over a few basic things. As usual, I ask you to silence any cell phones, please. If you're not acquainted with the facilities, please find the nearest exit to where you are. There's 6 of them. And there are restrooms in the back anytime you want to use the side doors that go back there. The procedure of the evening is I'm going to ask Mary Hammond in a minute to make a couple of announcements, and then we will proceed with the lecture and a time of questions and answers. And we end by reciting a prayer together. There will be no other announcements at the end. The prayer will come immediately at the end of questions and answers. And then we have some refreshments in the back if you want to stay a while, coffee and some cake. You're welcome to stay. So that's the layout and hopes of the evening, and I ask Mary now to say a few things.
Thank you, Tim. For those of you who have been joining us, we thought we'd change the procedure a little bit and get the business done beforehand so that when our speaker finishes, we can go right to refreshments and discussion. So, as Tim said, this is the last lecture of the series this year, so I just want to thank some people. I want to thank the monastic community. I want to thank the staff from the office and chef who have all worked behind the scenes to help make these evenings possible through advertising, through refreshments, just the great support that we get from all these people. And I want to thank all of you who have been coming regularly, because we wouldn't be going to all this effort if we didn't have people respond, and we appreciate your support by your presence and your financial support as well. Which leads me to the topic that I always have to talk about, and it isn't my favorite, but it's about asking for your financial help. When you leave this evening, as you know, we have our donation basket, and I just want you to consider the fact that this is a free will donation, and we want to keep it a free will donation. So those of you that can do a little bit more, if you can, think about what you pay for a movie ticket, and think about what you get from a movie and the lasting effects of coming to one of these lectures. So it's important for us, because we are independently financially funded from the monastery. Any general donations the monastery gets do not support the lecture series. We're really on our own. So any help that you can give us is greatly appreciated. We've been lucky this year. We've had many people respond to our request for Friends. The Friends brochure is in your handout. And those are people that can go the extra mile, have donated $100 or more to help us. And we've had about 15 people respond to that this year, which has been great. So consider that, if you will. And then finally, the feedback form. We'll be meeting next Thursday to review talk about tonight's lecture. So we do look at these. We give them serious consideration. And if you want to be on the mailing list to get the brochure for next fall, please make sure you fill out your name and address on the bottom. And as Tim said, we'll have refreshments afterward. We're recording tonight's CD. They'll be for sale afterward. If anybody wants, you can pay and sign up for them. And then, as the brochure said, we have our program together for next year. We have all our 6 speakers lined up. 8 speakers. 8 speakers? 6. And we're starting in the fall with Rabbi William Hamilton, and he's going to speak to the teachings of Abraham Heschel. Rabbi Hamilton is from Brookline, so we're lucky he's local. Our theme is Do Justice and Live in the Presence of God. So we hope that we will see you in October. And I will turn it over to Ruth Davis, who is going to introduce our speaker this evening.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Ruth.
Hi. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and once again, welcome and thank you for coming to the final lecture of this year's series. In the year 2000, under the leadership of William Barnwell, a former associate rector of Trinity Church in Copley Square, the church established the Trinity Education for Excellence program, known more familiarly as TEEP, T-E-E-P, a 5-week summer enrichment program for rising 7th and 8th grade students from the Boston Public Schools. These 12, 13, and 14-year-old students were recommended by their schools as having leadership potential ability, but who were also at a critical stage of adolescent development where their lives could go in many different directions. The TEEP program's classes are taught by master teachers from the Boston Public Schools, and over 5 weeks emphasize concentrated studies of English and math with strong programs of art and music. Hundreds of young people have now been through the program, and it is approaching its 18th year this summer. At the same time that TEEP was being founded, Trinity also established the Trinity Boston Counseling Center to expand access to mental health counseling to people of color and those who are looking to integrate spirituality into their therapy. Then in 2007, a separate nonprofit foundation was established to assume direction and oversight of these programs. And our speaker tonight, Louise Packard, was named the founding executive director. Louise Packard came to the foundation with an extensive background in nonprofit philanthropic development. She began her career as associate director of undergraduate admissions at Yale University and has worked for the Harvard Business School, Stanford Business School, and Central Park Conservancy in New York City. In the 10 years of the Trinity Boston Foundation's existence, Louise has developed and mentored a generation of rising young leaders who are now spread throughout the city, working on numerous youth-oriented agencies. Ms. Packard holds a Bachelor of Arts from Yale University and an MA in English Literature from Middlebury College. She serves on the board of Roxbury Presbyterian Social Impact Center and has spoken at conferences throughout the United States. Our theme for this past year's series has been Living in a Polarized World. Can the wolf and the lamb dwell together? And our speaker tonight will describe how building bridges can mitigate this polarization and that it is vital to all of us, whether we are from cities or suburbs, to be committed to the safety and futures of all of our young people. Please welcome Louise Packard.
Thank you, Ruth. I have 2 mics. Can you all hear me okay?
Sound great.
Okay. It is such a pleasure to be here, and I thank you all for turning out and coming to hear about what we're up to in Boston at Trinity Church. It's an honor to be part of this series and to be included in the set of topics about how to live in a polarized world and to work for reconciliation and justice and peace. I understand from the intros that the previous speakers have talked about many things that divide us: religion, politics, the crisis of climate change, refugees and immigration. So my topic centers on Boston, which in contrast to our progressive politics remains one of the most segregated cities in America and has a very high level of income inequality. The polarization I want to talk about centers on money and race and how poverty and systemic racism affect the lives of young people of color. I want to share with you what the Trinity Boston Foundation has learned about building bridges across Boston to work against polarization. And I hope that something I say tonight will encourage or inspire you in your own bridge building. Here's a roadmap for tonight's talk. I want to start with the Boston context, much of which is true of other cities in America. Second, I'm going to talk about what young people need to develop their potential and how our programs work to meet those needs. And finally, I want to share with you the practices that communities, schools, agencies, community organizations can adopt to most effectively promote the health and well-being of all. Throughout, I hope to share stories that bring all this to life. Fundamentally, I believe that our stories are the most powerful bridge builders and antidotes to polarization. They are essential to building relationships and trust and understanding and ultimately reconciliation. So let me begin by telling a bit of my story and the story of how the Trinity Boston Foundation came to be. And I should start by saying that if I'm going to talk about race and racism tonight, then perhaps the first thing I should do is claim my particular expertise, and it looks like many of you share this expertise with me. I'm an expert in knowing what it feels like to be a white person in America, and to know the benefits of a system that I did not create, but that nevertheless exists in all its painful strangeness and inequity. I also recognize the personal cost of racism to me, of living in a world that places value on skin color and hair texture, where it is harder to build relationships across racial lines, where my own racial bias is so deeply ingrained that it can never be fully eliminated. Of course, people of color bear the heaviest burden of racism, but all of us are diminished by it. To build bridges across racial lines, it's really important that we first take stock of our own racial identity and then listen intently through reading and watching films and videos and through personal conversations to the stories of others. So that being said, let me tell you how I came to Trinity. 18 years ago, I was the director of development at Harvard Business School when I met a woman at a baby shower who shortly thereafter persuaded me to leave my job and run a capital campaign at Trinity Church. This is the way God works in my life, and maybe some of you have similar kinds of stories. It wasn't particularly a rational thing to do, especially because this campaign they wanted me to run was $53 million, which seemed like a rather big leap of faith. Fortunately, with God's grace and mighty intervention, the congregation made that leap together and we accomplished our goal. By 2005, the church had a restored central tower, geothermal wells for energy efficient heating and cooling, and a beautiful undercroft, which vastly expanded the church's program space. I had a sense that I should stay at Trinity after the campaign. My quip was that I needed to make sure that we hadn't just raised all that money to build a fancy clubhouse for Episcopalians. I wanted to deliver on the promise of the building, and that it could be a civic resource, and that the new space could help us do even more to be a convener and catalyst, and to leverage our gifts and assets on behalf of all the people of Boston. Soon after the campaign ended, the Trinity Boston Foundation was born. As Ruth described in her introduction, there were two existing outreach ministries that the church had formed, TEAP, the Trinity Education for Excellence program, and the Trinity Boston Counseling Center. And those programs had gotten too big for the church's operating budget. And so in January 2007, we spun the two programs off from the church's operating budget, and we spun me off too, and created this 501c3 subsidiary, which totally has the wrong name, because Trinity Boston Foundation sounds like we have a lot of money and we give it away, neither of which is true. We raise money and we spend it in our programs, but one of these days we'll change the name of the organization. We've grown a lot in our first 10 years, from an operating budget of about $900,000 to $2.5 million, and we've grown from 2 programs serving about 200 individuals to 3 programs that engage over 500 individuals, and through indirect training of other organizations serve about 10,000. Although we're grounded in Trinity's commitment to social justice, I'm the only Episcopalian on the staff, and we're a staff of all faiths and no faith, and the youth and families we serve similarly run the gamut. Our mission is to unlock opportunity and change the odds for the youth of Boston. We work to accomplish this in 3 ways. First, we engage young people in transformative programs that offer the support, experiences, and opportunities every teen needs to develop their full potential. Second, we share with partner organizations our expertise in building communities in which youth, and particularly youth of color, can thrive. And third, with our partners, our volunteers, and our donors, we work at the systemic level to remove barriers and help make Boston itself be a community in which youth of color can thrive. So now you have the outline of my story, the genesis of Trinity Boston Foundation, and how this historic, predominantly white Back Bay church with a large endowment, they have a large endowment, the church does, came to have a social justice subsidiary focused on improving life outcomes for young people who live in Mattapan, Roxbury, and Dorchester, and how this white fundraiser from Harvard came to be its founding executive director. So let me talk for a bit about Boston and the context for Trinity's work. As I said in my introduction, Boston is considered to be one of the most racially segregated cities in America and has a high degree of income inequality. And here are a few statistics for you. So just under 50% of the population of Boston is white, so we're a majority-minority city. And but neighborhoods are pretty segregated. So here are the neighborhoods where most of the white people live. Back Bay, North End, Charlestown, South Boston, West Roxbury. All of those neighborhoods are 75% or more white. The people of color cluster in Mattapan, which is less than 4% white, Roxbury, Dorchester, East Boston, and Hyde Park. White families are less likely to send their children to public schools, except for the exam schools. So only 14% of the students in the Boston public schools are white. So segregation ties directly to inequality of assets. Home ownership is the major way families build and pass on wealth. But in Massachusetts, if you're not white, the chances are your family doesn't own a home. Statewide, almost 70% of white families own their own homes, while less than a third of Black, Latino, and Asian families do. While white households in Boston have a median wealth of $247,000, Dominicans and U.S. Blacks have a median wealth of close to zero. If you don't know the history of redlining and discriminatory lending practices, then I really recommend the film, maybe some of you have seen it, Race, the Power of an Illusion. And there's a segment in this film that's called The House We Live In, and it tells the whole story about how federal lending policies simultaneously increased segregation and robbed people of color from the opportunity to get a mortgage and gain wealth through home ownership. And then I think a lot of us know the story of, how white flight from the city created the white suburbs, and then in Boston, Route 128 put a whole lot of jobs, made a whole lot of jobs very accessible to those suburban communities. And I live in one of those, and those of you who live out here, you live in one of those too. I live in Lexington, which is roughly 75% white, 20% Asian, and 5% Black and Latino. I moved there for the school system back when my kids were very little, because it is, you know, it's one of the best in the country, right? A lot of Massachusetts districts that are some of the best in the country. The housing prices are also some of the highest in the state in Lexington, and so fortunate people with wealth, and the statistics demonstrate, it's mostly white people who have the wealth, get to live in the communities with great schools and safe streets and lots of parent engagement in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and Little League and hundreds of other activities that help kids grow and develop. And I confess that when I moved to Lexington, I wasn't thinking about this. I had no conscious thought that I was choosing a segregated community. I didn't stop to ask, well, why is this, and what does it mean that I go and live in Lexington? And I want to stop there because I want to be very, very clear, because you know this and I know this, that not all white people are wealthy, and that the advantages that come of being white in this country don't inoculate white people from all kinds of hardship, and economic hardship, personal hardship, health-related hardship. There's plenty of hardship to go around, and white people, we get to have it too. And I think we need to recognize that there's a system in place that started with slavery and continued through Jim Crow and the war on drugs and mass incarceration that has made the playing field uneven. It's a system that is unjust, that creates chronic polarization, and that will take all of us working together to dismantle. Racial disparities show up not only in household wealth, but also in measures of health and educational attainment. The problem is systemic, and therefore is also generational. High school graduation rates in Boston, which happily have risen in the last decade from 59% to 72%, still show different results along racial lines. The graduation rate for white students is 82.5%, for Asian students 88.2%, for Black students 69%, Latino students 67%. Chronic absenteeism, which leads to dropping out of school, is over 30% for Black and Latino males. And the data tells us high school dropouts constitute the majority of prison populations, are less likely to be employed, and are less likely to participate in family life. Further, the children of high school dropouts are more likely to live in poverty and more likely to drop out of school themselves. If we look at college graduation rates, we see the same issues. Most minority students who enroll in college end up dropping out. Only 42% of African Americans and 45% of Latinos from the class of 2009 in the Boston Public Schools who enrolled in college earned degrees within 6 years, compared with 64% of white students and 75% of Asians. And here's what's at stake. Only 4% of college graduates in this country live in poverty. So a college degree, and I think even more so the way our economies are going, are essential to earning a living wage. So as I said, Trinity Boston Foundation's mission is to change the odds, and we want to go after those high school and college graduation rates, particularly for the students of color with the worst odds. Let me underscore my next point. Racial disparities in health, wealth, and educational attainment point to systemic, institutionalized disadvantages and barriers to success. The question is not, so what is wrong with those people? The question is, what is wrong with our society, and why are there such great disparities? We can help individual students beat the odds, but we won't change the odds fundamentally until we address the why behind all of the disparities of outcomes. One of the whys is linked to the prevalence of trauma. Trauma that comes from poverty, living in unsafe neighborhoods, exposure to violence, racism, family dysfunction, and disruption, including homelessness or constant moving around. Studies show that childhood experiences of abuse and neglect have a negative impact on adolescent and adult life outcomes. Children with multiple exposures are even more at risk for alcoholism, depression, illicit drug use, intimate partner and other forms of violence, suicide attempts, early initiation of smoking and sexual activity, and adolescent pregnancy. Trauma is not a racial phenomenon, and it cuts across all population groups and income levels. Poverty is a significant factor in trauma, and wealth is a protective factor in that there can be money. If there's wealth, then there's money for counseling and support. People of color who live in poverty are more at risk for trauma and have less protection against its impact. Chronic and significant adversity is often referred to as toxic stress. Children who suffer from toxic stress are not getting what they most need: to be securely attached to loving adults, to experience the world as safe and predictable, to be encouraged and affirmed. There are physical as well as emotional consequences. When stress is positive or tolerable, like a child gets a shot or starts a new school, the fight or flight response can kick in temporarily. And the response is healthy and critical for survival. We all need that fight or flight response. But when stress is prolonged and not eased by the support of caring adults, that fight or flight response can be toxic to the brain and other organ systems. And the part of the brain that triggers the stress response, the amygdala, may become overdeveloped and overactive, while other areas of the brain that govern memory, learning, and decision-making are undeveloped. So the brain's architecture changes in response to trauma. And that change can have far-reaching effects. So a child constantly exposed to toxic levels of stress, the changes can result in chronic anxiety, learning delays, or poor social skills. Poverty itself is a source of toxic stress. Worry about whether there will be enough to eat, warm clothing to wear, a consistent home saps available brain capacity for impulse control, memory, and judgment. Studies show that there is a bandwidth tax that significantly compromises the overall quality of decision-making, all linked back to trauma. There's also research showing that situational stress can lower average IQ levels by almost 1 standard deviation, an impact comparable to the way people function when they've been deprived of a night of sleep. And then there's racial trauma. Psychologist Dr. Ken Hardy says this, I'm going to quote, "A toxic human mold, hard to see yet ever spreading, gnaws at the dignity of youth of color. They are oblivious to this infection, but emotionally reactive to its effects. It is perpetrated throughout society, including in the very systems with the stated mission of serving youth. For example, when youth of color are removed from their families and placed in a residential setting, they observe that most of their peers in care look like them. This reinforces a powerful message internalized since childhood: I am bad and unworthy." The Trinity Boston Counseling Center has been working in the state juvenile justice system, the Department of Youth Services, since 2004. The young people who are locked up, almost exclusively young people of color, were not born as bad kids, right? Nearly all of them experienced significant multiple traumas that impacted their development in ways beyond their control. Their stories make you weep. I will never forget the day that a young man who had been locked up for many months came for a run with our Soul Train program. It was his 18th birthday, and we had brought a cake for after the run, and we lit the candles and sang happy birthday to him. This tough young man got teary and said that he had never had a birthday cake before. He had bounced around in foster care for most of his life, and no one had ever valued him or cared enough about him to make a cake. I'm sorry to say that he's now serving a very long prison term, but when I think about him, I think about those tears. Did you know that in Massachusetts, 72% of youth in the juvenile justice system have also been involved in the foster care system? Did you know that most of the children in foster care were removed from their homes before the age of 5? Most parents who neglect their children were neglected by their own parents. So hurt people hurt people. See what I mean by systemic? So what is it that you young people need in order to beat the odds? At Trinity Boston Foundation, we focus on 3 things. Success building long-term positive relationships with peers and adults. Practice setting and achieving goals, which leads to a sense of agency and self-efficacy. Values to guide choices, and resilience in the face of setbacks. These are competencies that help young people overcome the impact of childhood adversity and progress toward high school and college graduation. We believe that academic achievement can be a result of these competencies, but we don't think students can stay the course throughout high school and college without developing these social and emotional skills. So it's why our primary programs are social and emotional, not tutoring programs. As important as that is, but you got to start with the kids' basic needs. These competencies are harder to master for young people who've experienced significant trauma. If you haven't been blessed with positive, trusting, consistent relationships with the adults in your life, how do you know how to have them? If you're used to being in fight or flight mode, if you've always needed to be on the lookout for someone who might harm you, how can you begin to feel safe? How can you learn to calm yourself down? If you've never felt successful, how do you have any confidence that you can learn to set and achieve goals? If you have no hope that things will get better, how do you have the resilience to keep trying? Let me tell you about Trinity's programs and how we approach these challenges. They are Soul Train, Boston Runs Together, the Trinity Education for Excellence program, and the Trinity Boston Counseling Center. Each program in different ways is designed to help dissolve destructive, trauma-based cycles that inhibit trust, prevent youth from recognizing their own potential, and obstruct the growth of healthy collaborative communities. Also, all 3 programs are integrated in an initiative at one site, the McCormick Middle School in Boston, which has become our innovation lab. The foundation also works with 15 public schools across Boston and in contractual partnerships with City Year Boston, the Department of Youth Services, St. Stephen's Youth Programs, and College Bound Dorchester. On its face, Soul Train Boston Runs Together is a school-based running program that helps middle and high school students prepare to run a 5-mile race or half marathon at the end of the school year. Trinity Boston Foundation sees the program as an evidence-based public health intervention focused on social, emotional, and physical health. Stanford University professor Kelly McGonigal cites Soul Train in her book, which she calls The Upside of Stress, and says this, I'll quote, "The approach Soul Train takes, inspiring a sense of personal possibility by fostering a mindset of connection, is supported by research. Students who feel supported and part of something bigger than themselves are also more likely to expect that they can improve their abilities through hard work and help from others. In turn, this leads them to engage more with challenges rather than give up. To many of its young members, Soul Train provides proof of their own potential. One teen keeps all her race bibs on her whiteboard in her bedroom so that they can inspire her every day when she wakes up." At Soul Train, young soul participants run alongside old soul mentor volunteers in a non-hierarchical context where everyone is celebrated as a champion no matter what individual running times may be, and where individual hardship is turned into a source of strength and confidence. One young soul who participated in the program loved to run so much, his mother called him Jalapeno Pepper because he was always running around the house. But he had been forced out of his home and into the foster care system and bounced from home to home. He started running at Soul Train and found an old soul who became a partner and a friend. These are volunteer old souls. And eventually another old soul took him in as a foster child, and Soul Train became, in his words, not just a family, but literally my family. The program gave this talented runner a sense of safety and trust that allowed him to overcome the hardships of his early life and draw confidence both from a reliable relationship and from his own performance. He is now a thriving second-year student at Brandeis University. Of Of course, running is good for you, right, and has a positive impact on mental and physical health. One young soul had struggled with disabling depression as a youth, but after joining Soul Train, he discovered his exceptional talent as a runner, which fueled new confidence and helped him find his place in high school. As a senior, he captained his state championship track team and will go to nursing school next year. A second foundation program is TEAP, the Trinity Education for Excellence program, whose core premise is that the consistency of relationships over many years can be a radical, life-changing force for good. TEAP's tightly knit community of middle and high school students focuses on values that give students a sense of control over life choices large and small. Like Soul Train, TEAP has created a community that students say feels like family. What distinguishes TEAP is the way it offers a sense of safety because it is highly structured and consistent. Students literally grow up in TEAP, some from summer before 7th grade all the way through high school, and some come back and work in the summer from college. They learn to apply its core values, which are the 5 R's: respect, responsibility, restraint, reciprocity, and redemption. And then in high school, they learn the 3 I's, which are intentionality, integrity, and influence. When they get to high school, they become paid counselors and have summer jobs that come with high expectations and high support. And they build leadership and job readiness skills essential to future success. In addition, having students, youth counseling staff, faculty, and full-time staff who are people of color facilitates at TEAP complex engagement with issues of racial and cultural identity. The power of durable relationships is evident in the story of one rising 9th grader who is completing her 3rd summer session. And after much individual work on setting and reaching goals, she asked to speak in front of the middle school group and staff. She was very shy and quiet and wanted to become stronger as a public speaker. Like the other TEAP students, her experience in the program had exposed her to visual thinking strategies. I don't know if any of you have heard of VTS, which was pioneered at Harvard Graduate School of Education. It's designed to develop critical thinking and creative skills and to jumpstart oral and visual literacy, as well as peer-to-peer collaboration. She spoke to a group of 8th graders and staff, having set this goal and prepared herself. She spoke articulately, she gesticulated effectively, she projected her voice with confidence and energy, and was a far cry from the retiring, shy, rising 7th grader who initially had entered the program. That TEAP student has gone on to be a star debater in high school. Another story demonstrates the power of the core values TEAP strives to instill. A high school senior in the TEAP program had suffered much hardship, including being forced from his home and experiencing the death of a close friend. Then he was held back in his senior year, which could have become a humiliating and disabling failure. But thanks to the support and mentorship of his TEAP counselors, he was able to own his experience publicly, speak to his teachers, school administrators, and then spoke to the students in the summer, and acknowledged that failure happens, but what matters is what you do with it. And so by taking responsibility for his actions rather than blaming or lashing out, he demonstrated the value of redemption, one of the 5 R's, and in the process provided a valuable lesson in recovery and leadership to his peers, younger students, and the staff and faculty. He's repeating his senior year and is still engaged at TEAP and will go to college next year. The 3rd program, Trinity Boston Counseling Center, offers individual counseling and life coaching to young people and adults who need more intensive, individualized services in addition to community-based programs. Typically, these services are delivered as part of what we call the Trinity At model, which embeds clinicians and life coaches in other organizations. So Trinity at St. Stephen's, Trinity at City Year, Trinity at College Bound Dorchester, etc. And by embedding these clinicians, we help the organizations effectively address the social and emotional needs of the young people they serve. having Trinity staff on site 4 days a week provides ongoing opportunities for them to model trauma-informed care, sustain the program staff, be present for crisis intervention and support, and advocate for the best possible outcomes for the young people they serve. The Embedded Counseling Center staff shares 3 core practices with organizational partners to help them create safe and supportive communities. So I'm in the 3rd piece of my talk about what are the practices that make healthy communities. And I should note that Soul Train and TEEP incorporate these practices as well. So they are trauma-informed practices. I hope I've convinced you that trauma is a really big deal and needs to be addressed. Restorative justice and circle practices, which are a lot about relationships. And then racial awareness and equity. So let me talk about each of these. First, trauma-informed practices. At Trinity, our ideas, so this is a lot of people are now talking about trauma-informed practices, and so I have to ground it in what we mean by that when we say that. And at Trinity, we base our work on a framework developed at the Trauma Center of the Justice Resource Institute called the ARC framework, ARC, which stands for Attachment, Self-Regulation, and Competency. And so for a community to become trauma-informed, the adults in the community need to understand these concepts and need to put them into practice. So of paramount importance for adults working with populations who've experienced significant trauma is the goal of not overreacting when young people have trauma symptoms and get into fight or flight mode. If teachers can keep their cool, situations are less likely to escalate and students can feel safer. This not only depends on training, but it also matters that the adults not be burned out from their work. It turns out that many of the practices that help the students also help the adults. So positive working relationships, recognition, respect, make all the difference both for the young people and for the adults in the system. So self-regulation is a kind of academic way of saying keeping your cool. And I think we can all think of times when we couldn't keep our cool, right? My true confession is the one that always gets me is the automated phone system where you can't get to the place you need to get. I've yelled into the phone at machines many times in my life. Yeah, road rage, right? That's the other one that is so ubiquitous. But if you have a significant trauma history, you're more likely to get triggered and go to that place I go when I can't get to the right place on the phone system. So Trinity counselors help young people become more attuned to what is happening in their bodies as they become triggered, right? So what is it? I mean, we all know, right? Your heart rate goes up, you get flushed, and you lose access to your prefrontal cortex and your ability to make decisions. You're just yelling in a phone. What the counselors do is they offer routines and rituals that help the young people modulate the effect of the trauma and kind of pull themselves back together. At the McCormick School, we've developed what we call the re-regulation room, which has a whole lot of different activities in it, from deep breathing to listening to music to creating art, meditating, or exercising. My favorite one is, apparently, if you hold an ice cube in your hand, that can really help you pull yourself back together. So you can remember that. I think we can't do that quite, but I think they keep wet washcloths in the freezer. So it's the same thing. You know, how do you calm down? So students can visit the re-regulation room when they get upset and not able to function in their classroom. Time in the re-regulation room allows them to center themselves and then to go back to the classroom. And this year we've seen 2 signs of really significant progress. The first is that students are using the room less as the year has progressed. And the second is that they're spending less time in the re-regulation room, so it's not as hard for them to pull themselves back together. And these are life skills, right? When people say count to 10, take a breath, right? We all have our mechanisms, and if you've got a significant trauma history, it's probably going to take you a little more than counting to 10, but the more aware you can be of when your body is losing it, the more in control you feel about pulling yourself back together. So as we use this re-regulation room and help kids go there less often and spend less time there when they do go, then they're spending more time in class, right? So you got to deal with the social emotional in order to get to the academic. The C in the ARC framework is competency building, which is really what I've just been talking about, right? As young people begin to experience consistent relationships and master self-regulation skills, they build new neural pathways that help students feel ownership of their trauma and success in overcoming its impact. So that's trauma-informed practices. The next piece is restorative justice and circle practice. Does that ring a bell to anybody here? Yeah. So restorative justice is a big paradigm shift from punishment thinking that has proven so unsuccessful as a means of reducing violence and creating a school-to-prison pipeline, right? Because if your first recourse is to suspend, right, you send kids home, back out on the streets, and multiple suspensions reduces time in class, or reduces time at school, and apparently once you get underneath about 86% attendance rate, then your likelihood of dropping out goes way up. So it's a framework for building community and responding to challenging behaviors in ways that make things right, bringing those who are harmed together in collaborative dialogue that can offer meaningful justice to all involved. So the paradigm shift is significant. It acknowledges that troublesome behavior is normal and relocates the authority figure from being like the principal who's the punisher to being a convener or facilitator. It moves the responsibility for the well-being of the community from the leader, or the principal in a school's case, to the community itself. So we're all responsible for the health of our community. A fundamental difference in the approach is the question frame. So instead of asking, what happened, who's to blame, and what is the punishment, we can ask, what happened, who was affected, and how, what harm was done, and how can it be repaired or made right. It provides an opportunity for the person responsible to right the wrong. Another important difference is that the community solves the problem collectively rather than having punishment meted out by one authority figure, and thus the success is also owned by the community, which benefits both the community and all its individual members. So a key tool used by Trinity Boston Foundation is restorative justice circles, which can be seen as containers for this practice. Sitting in circles is inherently democratic. Everyone is equal if you're all in a circle, as opposed to the implicit hierarchy of, the way we're sitting right now with me up front and you all sitting there in rows. So they're a powerful tool for individual healing and organizational learning. And major breakthroughs can occur with this approach. So at one site, teachers and staff were struggling to cope with youth who could not self-regulate, somebody who is not doing the work, swearing in class, causing disruption in the hallways. And he always kept the hood of his sweatshirt over his face. At one point, a Trinity counselor on site brought the youth into a spontaneous circle with his teachers and asked everyone in the circle one question. Was there ever a time when you really struggled, but things turned out well and you learned something? One teacher admitted that she had a serious learning disability, but overcame it to become a teacher herself. Then everyone was asked to say something appreciative about the youth himself. It became a very positive experience for the teenager, who at the end of the circle removed his hood. Two more stories. Outside the school, a student jumped another student to beat him up. And this not only caused harm to the student, but also to the student's younger sister, who was also a student at the school and got scared. In a circle with the perpetrator, the victim, and the victim's sister, the perpetrator was able to hear about the impact not only on the victim, but on the victim's sister. And he was deeply moved and apologetic. Think about the impact of that experience on all three students as well as the teachers in the circle. Harm was healed, hearts were moved, and what a difference the circle could make versus the perpetrator simply being yelled at and suspended and outcast, right? Another story is a circle that happened after some girls bullied another girl who had a physical disability. Once the perpetrators in the circle had a chance to hear directly from the girl what that felt like to be mocked, they couldn't apologize fast enough. Building bridges just in a circle, right, at the school. So I want to argue that we're all eager to hear each other's stories, and that restorative circle practices give us a form to do that. Now, actually, Trinity Boston Foundation staff, we start every meeting with a circle. It changes the whole tenor of our meetings. Okay, so the third core practice is racial awareness and equity. And I have to tell you, I saw one of my staff shared a New Yorker cartoon with me this morning. And it's a drawing of an elephant lying on a therapist's couch, saying to the therapist, "I feel like no one even knows I'm there." So my point is that organizations that serve youth of color, really all organizations, have to make it a practice to talk about race. And to not talk about it is to deny a dimension of reality that shapes all of us and has a daily negative impact on people of color. More, it is incumbent upon all of us who aim for systemic change, and not simply to support individual young people, to think about all the ways we can work to dismantle the system. At Trinity Boston Foundation, we've devoted significant time and attention to staff training and conversation about racial issues. Working toward becoming an anti-racist organization is one of the 4 goals in our 5-year strategic plan. We've recently promoted one of my colleagues to the role of Director of Community Learning and Racial Equity, and we've created a learning community of over 20 partner organizations to share that journey with us. If you Google Trinity Boston Globe, there was an article at the end of January about our staff anti-racism work, and you can read all about ways that I made mistakes at the beginning of the journey. I still make mistakes, but I talked about them in the Boston Globe in January. At the same time, we also know the importance for individuals to develop a positive racial identity to combat negative messages. And our programs work to help young people understand and take pride in the strengths of their racial heritage, history, and identity. I want to close by telling you about Trinity's work at the McCormick Middle School, where we're trying to apply everything we know about both individual and organizational change. McCormick is located near UMass Boston and was originally built to serve the children of the Columbia Point housing development. Today, the school has about 450 students, most students of color from South Boston and different sub-neighborhoods of Dorchester. As the largest middle school in Boston, the McCormick serves a high-needs population of youth who overall are either unable to access or be positively supported in the smaller BPS schools. A snapshot of the student body population shows that the vast majority are low income. 25% of them have special education services, and 40% are English language learners, many of them newcomers who just arrived in the country within a year. In a 2013 survey, 41.6% of McCormick students reported having lost a family member or someone close to them as a result of violence. A full 34% reported having lost 2 or more loved ones to violence. 34% have lost 2 or more loved ones to violence. Uneven academic achievement at the school speaks to the challenges both inside and outside of the classroom that many of the students at the McCormick encounter on a daily basis. Trauma, loss, and extraordinary hardship are forces that perpetually shape and reshape the lives of McCormick students. Most students are coping with being separated from beloved family members or are facing instability or physical threat in their homes and in their neighborhoods. Many students come to school hungry, and some miss school because of circumstances beyond their control. The devastating impact of systemic racism, community violence, and poverty on the young people of the school influences how they feel about themselves, how they treat each other, and how they view their future. The often unnamed and unaddressed challenges they face can make it virtually impossible to concentrate on learning, to have trusting relationships, or to have the hope needed to be motivated. It is our belief that students cannot learn the concrete skills necessary for emotional, social, or academic success until they feel safe, respected, and welcomed in their school community. The Trinity Counseling Program at McCormick strives to mitigate those realities by creating a trauma-sensitive restorative haven in the Trinity Room. This is addition to the re-regulation room. And ultimately within the entire school. We aspire to cultivate a school environment where students can experience safety, a sense of belonging, and opportunities to contribute and grow. At the heart of our work is the belief that we need to understand the interconnection between emotional well-being and social injustice in order to address the needs of the whole child, tapping into the intellectual, emotional, physical, and spiritual needs of young people. Our holistic, social justice-oriented, and clinically informed work strives to create a safe and supportive community where students and adults can thrive. Many volunteers have joined us in this work at the school. In the fall of 2016, we were approached by a group of teachers who wanted to build a library. Yes, it is true that less than half of the schools in the Boston Public School System have a staffed library. Thanks to a collaboration between the teachers and Trinity Boston Foundation volunteers, the McCormick now has a library with 6,000 volumes that is staffed by volunteers 4 days a week. Diamond Middle School, in my town of Lexington, put together a book drive that added more than 2,000 books to the collection. Our volunteers have recently started an after-school tutoring program and are working to enhance the physical spaces of the school to be more welcoming and trauma-informed. We're looking at food and whether we can access food from the Greater Boston Food Bank because so many of our students, their school lunch is their main meal of the day. And we're looking at clothing and how we can have, the nurse's office can have a supply of shoes and pants and warm coats and whatever students need coming in. We find this not only helps the students, but it really helps the teachers and their burnout, because if they can meet the needs of the students they're serving, they feel a whole lot better about their own work and their ability to contribute. So it's a really exciting effort. It's a thrill to see the wider community embrace this school, and maybe some of you would like to lend a hand, in which case I'd love to talk to you about that in the reception. So let me close with one last story. When the library opened and a group of students first walked into the space, one of the students said, "This is so beautiful. What did we do to deserve this?" Which takes me back to where I started this talk. The student who didn't think he deserved a beautiful library is responding to messages that he hears every day that he is not valued and cared for. We collectively need to reach him with programs, and we need to work to change our city and our country so that he can be surrounded by signs that he matters. We need to hear his story. We need to hear his parents' story. And we need to build bridges of relationship across the divide. Bridges that can change the world. Thank you. Do you have questions, or? I saw lots of nodding. Plenty of people. Sure.
How does a child enter your program, or is it you go to schools and find them, or do they come to you, or this doesn't work? But
So the question is, how do we find the students we serve? And each program has a different way of doing that, right? So the TEAP program, where students come to Trinity Church in the summer and then for programming throughout the year, we go to schools, to 6th grade teachers, guidance counselors, principals, whoever we can talk to, and ask for referrals to the program. And we're looking for students that the teachers are worried about, but see something great. You know, they see this is a great kid, and he really needs the supportive structure of TEAP this summer, or whatever the story is. And then, because it is 5 days a week and you have to get there at 8:30 in the morning, we require that a parent or caregiver come to interview with the student. So the family needs to be intact enough to have the capacity that someone can come and actually interview. But we have a set of schools that tend to refer most of our students to the TEAP program. Soul Train is in 15 different Boston public schools, and that's a model where the teachers and staff at the school are the leads on the program, so we provide the curriculum and the training and the events and the sneakers and the race bibs, etc., but it's actually volunteers at the school who do the practices every week, and they recruit from within the school. And then the Trinity Boston Counseling Center, as I was saying, is embedded in organizations across the city. So for the most part, we go out rather than having people come in. Yeah. Yes.
How are you funded?
Any way we can. Like most, this is my version of trauma, right? Most executive directors, right? I'm sure many of you in the room understand that. So we're funded by individual donors, foundation grants. Some of our embedded work, we actually have contracts with organizations who pay us to come and do the work. We have events. We just had a team running the Boston Marathon and raising money for us. We do the Rodman Ride in the fall. So lots and lots and lots of different ways. Yeah, yeah. And Trinity Church gives us our space, which is great. Right. Yeah.
The number, I'm not sure if I got this right, that it was staggering. Did you say that 72% of the folks who are in juvenile detention came from foster homes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that right?
Yeah, it's dual system. It really tells you about, you know, the kids who are ending up in the justice system. That's the end of the road, right? But the problems start happening, and a big chunk of those happen. The home removals come before the age of 5. So you're just putting kids on a path that it's really hard to recover from.
And it would mean that they're changing schools as well if they're going from one foster home
Yeah.
to another. And a place like what you provide would help be something cohesive, but it's really going uphill, isn't it?
It is, and in fact, it's our work in the juvenile justice system that got us to the McCormick Middle School, because we said if you back this up and we can intervene earlier, and we've had, you know, pretty good success stories from picking kids up in 6th grade at the McCormick and working consecutively with them for 3 years in these re-regulation skills, and having them feel that there's a consistent, caring adult. The school's beginning to be more trustworthy. So, you know, people can overcome trauma, but it takes a lot of support. And typically, you know, once you start bouncing around, it's really hard to access that long-term support.
Yes, I have a question. Do you have availability for the parents or for the caretakers of these children, or how do you systemically reach out to help these people to help the children?
Right. That's in our strategic plan to do more work with parents and provide more support with parents. The more deeply we're engaged with students, the more deeply we're engaged with their parents, because you can't. Right, exactly. And parents need a lot of support, and they're having their own trauma from poverty and racism and, you know, their immigration status and whatever else. And typically, if the kids have been having trouble, they may, from their own history, have negative feelings about when a school calls. And certainly over time, with a kid who's getting a lot of calls home, you've got to repair the relationship between the school and the parent. And we spend a lot of our time focusing on that. Because when that's broken, it's really hard to be collaborative. Yeah. Yeah. Shall I pick one?
Is there a plan to form programs for younger children?
So there are other organizations that focus on younger children, and that's really important. I mean, we live in an ecosystem, right? We're not the only youth-serving organization in Boston. There are many of them. And our expertise is in the middle school and high school. But yes, it's really important that there are early intervention programs, and a lot of that involves the parent work as well. Yeah.
How are your volunteers trained to work with this population?
Great question. Great question. So we are realizing more and more that we want our volunteers to get a lot of training, and particularly our white volunteers to get some racial identity and awareness training before they're actively trying to build relationships with the students we serve. And there's been some resistance to that and some great enthusiasm for that, right? The resistance is, it's a kid, I'm a parent, of course, but in fact, there's just a whole lot, because we all have our implicit biases, and we need to be very conscious of not acting them out. Depending on the job, there's been, we're amping up our volunteer training, which I think is making it more meaningful for everybody. But we have a ways to go on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you think Boston is more segregated than most other cities in the country? That's amazing.
Well, there may be people in the room that understand the history better than I do, but a lot of it is the redlining and it's wealth, and it's the redlining, right? So there were decisions made about where they were going to put those red lines and where the federal government wasn't going to back mortgages. And white flight, I think Roxbury was initially a heavily Jewish neighborhood, and that, others may know this more, but it's history over time. And then the problem is that the wealth gap really exacerbates things, right? Because the South End used to be a lot more mixed than it is now because it's gentrified. And then, that's the people of wealth are moving into the South End, and that's changing the racial composition of the neighborhood. Yeah. Yes.
Louise, the scope of this program is breathtaking. I'm aware of another program in Boston, Stepping Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a simple, easy to understand program.
I know.
So when I think about your program, I'm thinking about where are the genius minds who put this thing together? There are so many moving parts, from education, sociology, neuroscience, finance.
Yeah.
Who had the big blueprint?
Well, I hope. I hope there was divine inspiration. Otherwise, but I think it evolved. And it started with a counseling center and a leadership development program, frankly, because the priest Ruth mentioned, William Barnwell, came from Trinity, New Orleans, which had a counseling program and a leadership development program. So he brought those two. And then once you start thinking about the whole range of issues in between the trauma and how do you get to high school graduation and college graduation, it's pretty complex, right? And I do think that the fact that we are grounded in a church enables us to decide to be a little more complex, a little more holistic, a little more complicated, a little more willing. We definitely just want to be in Boston, and we want to strengthen the fabric and social cohesion of the city, and therefore a simpler program, which is really good if you want to replicate it and scale it. And frankly, Soul Train is our one scalable program. So that is a pretty simple program, and we are scaling that. But the other things are trying to work at the systemic issues, because I think that's where, to the extent it's the church, that's where the church is called, and is to make that lasting change. And so because we're grounded on, that the parish predates the revolution, right? So we've got some history, and I think that stability has just given us a sense that we could experiment more, innovate more, try to bring things together more. And I am the founder, and my board would tell you that there's nothing Louise couldn't take and make more complicated. So there's a bit of my personality that's behind all that too. Yeah.
What disciplines are involved in your organization?
So clinical social workers are the kind of the largest number. And we have a number of staff who've been through the dual degree program at Boston College in social work and theology, and I think that's probably primary. But then we've added from our board and advisors a lot of other disciplines. Yeah.
You said you're working with to bring the bridge between the students and their parents. Just trying to see a program of getting those parents educated as well, like those who don't have high school, because they're not, you have the parent who he or she is also deficient in educational skills, and therefore is already accepted some kind of a lower paying job, and you're already working with the kid to achieve something higher. Mm-hmm. What do you do about bringing that parent along, who also needs the same kind of bridge building and self-esteem that the child is getting, so they in turn will be able to bring that to the child that's way younger than the child that's in the middle school.
So
the reason I only say that is because I taught in slums for in St. Louis for a long time.
Yeah. So I think we would say the same thing is true, that we think about our students, that social emotional support is number one before people can achieve more than they think is possible. And so one thing that we have tried to do with our TEEP parents, because we have those parents for the longest period of time, is to build relationships among the parents and with us. The one area that I would love to expand to, but it would make our model more complicated, is I'd love to start doing adult ESL, because I think language classes also are relational activities. So it's critical skill building, but it's also relational. And so we'll see where that goes. But my heart goes out to parents who are, struggling with economic hardship and trying to raise kids. It's hard enough to raise kids if you have enough money to cover the basics, and I can't imagine trying to do it without that. Yeah.
Can you help me understand a little bit more the counseling component? Because you said it's embedded in schools. So can you kind of help me visualize what that looks like on the day-to-day?
Sure.
And a couple of other points, like who is it that's running that program? Is that are they licensed social workers, and how do you find them? How are they part of the program? And then the third part is, how do you work with the parents there? Because you speak of, language is obviously a barrier, but then also with varying cultures, like their belief in the benefits of counseling and of mental health.
Yes.
There's a wide range of belief systems there.
And did you hear that the founding of the counseling center was to do two things? One was to expand access to mental health counseling, and initially the idea was that because there is such a stigma, particularly in communities of color, about mental health counseling, that if you provide it at a church, your pastor can say, I think you should go see the people at Trinity, and that's a lot easier to manage. And then the integrated therapy, which actually also works well for many of us, including people of color for whom church is an anchor, to try to do therapy without being able to talk about your faith doesn't really make sense. So that's a piece of it. Anyway, in the schools, So we have licensed clinical social workers, and we also have graduate interns, placements, and then people who have graduated with their degree and they're getting their clinical hours. But it's all managed by and supervised by licensed clinical social workers. So they run that program. And what it looks like day to day is that we have a caseload of students. So there's a group of clinicians who are working with a caseload of students. And there's a clinical manager who's also thinking whole school. And she would tell you that she spends her day as a community organizer because she's trying to get all these practices into the system. So let's do a circle. And when you know it's working is when the teachers start saying, I think we need a circle. We've even, I talked about burnout, we've just started a new partnership with Kripalu, the yoga center in the western part of the state. And they have a 5-day RISE program, which is, I don't know what it stands for, but it's all about how to become healthy. And Kripalu has given scholarships for staff at the Department of Youth Services and staff at the McCormick School to go spend 5 days. And the assistant principal, Ms. Vest, went to RISE, and she came back, and I was getting emails because I'm on the listserv. And I kept saying, who is this woman? What did they do with Miss Vest? Because all of a sudden she wants to do, they now, in the morning announcements that come over the loudspeaker, they do a breathing exercise for everybody in the school. And there's like all this new stuff is happening. And they want to do yoga and mindfulness for teachers after school and get it into the classroom. And we're thinking about how are we all eating, and amazing things are happening. But it's more of a community organizing model, like, yes, let's do that, and let me facilitate the circle for you, or let me model this, or this kid in the hallway, I'm a social worker at the school, this kid who's not on my caseload but is melting down, and I'm going to step in and model how to de-escalate the situation, right? So, we can all go to trainings and forget immediately, and they can be really good and interesting, and then the next week, what was it I was supposed to do? But if you do training with all this modeling and support just in the milieu of working in the school, then the culture starts to shift. So caseload, very formal. We, get permission from parents, and we, do a very formal intensive counseling program. But then we're also working school-wide to try to change the school, and then take these practices like re-regulation. We've had a re-regulation room. Now we want to see with the sheltered English immersion program if the teachers, what the teachers can make of having re-regulation activities just in the back of the classroom. So a kid who can't sit still, do they have to go all the way to the re-regulation room, or can they go to the back of the classroom and draw or put on headphones or do something? Tear paper, I don't think that would be distracting, but apparently that's another good one. Tearing paper. Does that help some? Yeah. Yes?
I'd like to applaud your efforts on including an athletic component, a running component specifically, in your programs. I think that's extremely important. Having grown up in the city of Boston and Roxbury and Jamaica Plain and Rossendale, running and the coaches that I had in the city changed my life incredibly. They weren't counselors, they weren't licensed counselors, certainly.
Right.
But the counseling that they gave all the young people on those teams, and I still think fondly back in those times. I'll bet, an awful lot of kids went to college just because they had good coaching and a good program. How do you get the coaches, and when do they?
Well, in fact, some of the best volunteers are people who are not runners, and they're just in it with the kids to try to see if we can run a mile, run 2 miles, run 3 miles. And the running side by side is kind of like, I'm a parent, when you're in the car with your kid and you're not looking at each other, you can have a different kind of conversation. So the running together, meanwhile, we hold trauma in our bodies and we hold stress in our bodies, so the running is actually a great way to process all that emotion through. So even if we're not, we do have track coaches come and and talk to our, in our trainings of our soul trained volunteers about, how to prevent injury and all those sorts of things. But a lot of it is just getting out there and getting a pair of sneakers and hitting the pavement, right? I mean, it's, when I run, I feel better about myself. No question, yeah.
How many volunteers do you have? It sounds like there's volunteers for
There are a lot.
how blessed you are.
Yeah, we have a couple hundred, and especially in our Soul Train program, we probably have 100, and then we have a big group at the McCormick that's getting even bigger. I think there's something magic happening there at the McCormick that people are finding that it's, it's easy. You can drive there, you can park, and you can go connect into an ecosystem and make a difference. I mean, we all want to be proximate, right? We don't want to just be out here and think about what's happening there. We want to be there. And
Alone is a process with all the volunteers to get that organized into.
it is, but we have great volunteers.
One
Yeah.
more question.
Last one, or maybe we've done it. All right, well,
We're done. Thank you, Louise.
thank you all so much. You're so kind.